Yesterday I made a video telling you guys every fight I need to see made next in the UFC's lightweight division, and today we're going to be covering the UFC Featherweight division. I'm going to go through every single ranking spot in that division, giving you guys the matchups I want to see made next when the UFC returns to normal at the end of the year. Fingers crossed this whole epidemic and pandemic just stops so we can return to having fun with our weekends. I'm going to go through every single ranked fighter, telling you who they should fight next, and then I might go into some unranked guys as well, giving you some fun matchups between up-and-comers in the division. But first of all, let's start with the champion. Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway 2 needs to take place. Both guys deserve a chance in very different ways. Max Holloway deserves a chance to right the wrong of the first fight and prove that he's still the champion of the world. He was a defending champion. There right now isn't a clear-cut contender for the title. We've got 4 guys in the division that all could have arguments in their own way. However, Max Holloway deserves his title rematch, and this is the perfect time to do it because it gives the rest of the top 5 a chance to figure things out amongst themselves and make themselves the #1 contender, rather than a bunch of if, or, ands and buts between all 4 of them. Let's see who's the best out of the top 5. In the meantime, let's give Holloway a chance to get his belt back, and also let's give Volkanovski a chance to prove that the first fight wasn't a fluke, because we all know it wasn't a fluke. Volkanovski won every single round. However, it was a close competitive fight. I'm sure Volkanovski would want more of a statement to be made in a fight, maybe even a finish over Max Holloway. So this is the chance he is getting to prove that he's the new champion of the division. If you beat the old champion twice, you run shit now. Okay, that's just how things work. He beat Max Holloway, and people are always going to say, but Max Holloway has the defenses, and Max Holloway beat all these other guys, and Max Holloway had the massive streak through the division. Volkanovski beats him again. All of a sudden, all of these guys ain't saying shit about Max Holloway anymore. Volkanovski's the new fucking champion. I think that's the fight they're going to make next. It was the fight they were going to make next at UFC 251 in Perth, Australia, but they had to cancel that one or postpone it or something. So now, let's just rebook it. In Australia, give Volkanovski that opportunity. He's giving Holloway a rematch here. He doesn't have to do that. So at least give him a chance to defend in his home country of Australia. I think that's the best move to make next. And now let's get to why that's the best move. Because the top 5 of the featherweight division, and I'm going to run through all of them right now, there are 4 candidates. There's Brian Ortega, but he's coming off a loss, so he's not really in the mix right now. But other than that, you've got Korean Zombie, Zabit Magomedsharipov, and Yair Rodriguez. All 3 of those men need one good win to earn themselves a title shot in the UFC Featherweight division. And whichever one of them does it more impressively is probably going to get the next title shot. So, let's talk about who I want to see fight. I know Brian Ortega versus the Korean Zombie needs to happen next, and that will happen next, according to me. Brian Ortega versus the Korean Zombie is the main fight I want to see. Before Brian Ortega slapped that K-pop guy in the face, I didn't want to see this fight whatsoever. I thought this was stupid. I wouldn't mind seeing Korean Zombie versus Yair Rodriguez 2. I wouldn't mind seeing Korean Zombie versus Zabit Magomedsharipov. That would be a great fight as well. But now that this whole situation has happened and this whole beef has happened, Ortega versus Korean Zombie is the next fight to make. I don't want to see anything else. You can't have that moment in press and in the media of that whole altercation going down and not capitalize on it by having a fight. That fight needs to happen. It needs to be the main event of a fight night. Brian Ortega versus the Korean Zombie is the next fight down the list to make, which leaves us with the other 2 usual suspects. Yair Rodriguez versus Zabit Magomedsharipov. Again, 2 guys who need one more win to earn themselves a title shot. They can earn that win off of each other if they do it in impressive enough fashion. But one thing I do want to see is this become a main event fight. I want to see Zabit Magomedsharipov go 5 rounds, because when you're arguably going to be fighting Holloway or Volkanovski for a title, me seeing you go 5 rounds is a very big factor, because Zabit Magomedsharipov doesn't have the most finishing ability in the division over top level guys. So odds are he's going to be going to decision a lot. And if he can prove to us before he gets a title shot that he can go 5 rounds comfortably, much like Korean Zombie and Yair Rodriguez did in their main event, much like Brian Ortega has done, well, going 4 rounds with Holloway is going 10 rounds with other guys. So I kind of count that for Brian Ortega. But either way, I want to see Zabit Magomedsharipov go the distance before he fights for the title. I want to see him at least sign a 5-round fight, show me that he has the confidence to fight a 5-round fight, because I mean, you don't turn them down in main events. You don't say, I'm only taking the main event if it's for 3 rounds. That just shows me that there's clearly some kind of problem. And before you say staph infection, That's not the facts. That's not true whatsoever. He hasn't had staph infection every single time he fights. That's just not true. I know it's a great excuse to say, oh, staph infection, staph infection. You don't have it every time you fight, and if you do, you're retarded and you should wash more. You know what I'm saying? But Zabit Magomedsharipov versus Yair Rodriguez is the fight I want to see made next. They have history, of course. Back in the day, Yair Rodriguez turned it down, which was a smart move, to be fair to him. Who wants to take on the up-and-comer when you're in the rankings looking for a fight with Frankie Edgar? That didn't work out well for Yair Rodriguez, but either way, if I was Yair Rodriguez, hell yeah, I'm taking a Frankie Edgar fight over Zabit Magomedsharipov. I can't even pronounce this guy's fucking name. I'm taking Frankie Edgar. He's top of the division. He's going to get me towards a title shot. So, it all worked out. Now it's a bigger fight than it would have been back then. Zabit versus Yair is the next fight on this list I want to see. And I also want it to be the main event of a fight night because it has earned that. And it will be an amazing fight. Zabit versus Yair, Ortega versus Korean Zombie, Holloway versus Volkanovski 2. Now let's get to the rest of the division. Here's where things get a little bit interesting because you've got a few guys in the UFC's featherweight division right now that aren't even there. You've got Edgar, who we know is going down to bantamweight. We've got Jose Aldo, who's already at bantamweight, but somehow still ranked number 11 in the featherweight division. Why don't they just remove him rather than tarnish his name by dragging him through the absolute dirt? I have no idea, but that's what they've chose to do. So we're going to pick up wherever the most vacant guy is. Jeremy Stephens is below Frankie Edgar, and Frankie Edgar isn't fighting in the division anymore. So, Stephens versus Katar is the fight I want to see made next. That's very obvious. It was booked for UFC 249. That would have been an amazing fight to make. I'm so looking forward to that fight. And now that we've been teased with it so much, we have to have that fight. That is a fight of the night. Anytime Calvin Katar and Jeremy Stephens throw bombs constantly, they keep it on the feet, they stand and trade. That's the fight I want to see made next. It makes sense for both guys. I know Stephens is coming off a loss, but so is Calvin Katar. Makes sense. Two guys coming off a loss. Who's going to stay relevant in a division and who's going to sink to the bottom of the queue? Is this going to be Jeremy Stephens' last fight? Because if he loses, it might well be, because he's been on a lot of losses recently. I believe he's had 4 fights recently without a win. He lost to Yair, he lost to Zabit, he lost to Aldo, and then a no contest with Yair. That's 4 fights with no win. He needs this one desperately. Because even with the no contest in between, that's a 3-fight loss streak right there. He needs it desperately. Hopefully he gets... Well, I don't know if hopefully, because I really want Calvin Katar to win. Calvin Katar coming off a close loss to Zabit Magomedsharipov, where if it would have been the originally scheduled 5 rounds that all main events are, he would have won that fight, because Zabit Magomedsharipov was gassing out, gasping for air at the end of the 3rd round, staring up the clock like every time he fights. I want to see Katar versus Stephens. I want to see these two boys throw leather. I want to see who's the best gunslinger in the featherweight division. I think it'll be Calvin Katar, but I'm ready to be proven wrong by Lil Heathen, because he seems to have a habit of shutting down hype trains. Do Ho Choi, you know? Moving on to another guy. Josh Emmett is taking on Edson Barboza. When that fight was first announced, I thought, you know what? Great stuff. Barboza gets a top 10 ranked opponent in Josh Emmett. Josh Emmett gets a big name that he's been looking for to establish himself in the division and maybe have a bit more bargaining power, because if you take a guy who's coming down or up from another division, the UFC likes you. You know, you don't have to take that fight with Edson Barboza. That does nothing for Josh Emmett's ranking position. Barboza holds no stake in the featherweight division whatsoever. So if Josh Emmett takes that fight, does a favour for the UFC, I can see him getting propelled up the rankings sooner rather than later, and maybe the winner of Josh Emmett versus Edson Barboza will be taking on the winner of Jeremy Stephens versus Calvin Katar. That would be my ideal world. So Josh Emmett, Edson Barboza is the fight to rebook and make. It made all the sense in the world, even though I would have loved to have seen Josh Emmett versus Arnold Allen, which was originally scheduled for UFC Fight Night Raleigh. I'll give Josh Emmett the fight with Edson Barboza, and we'll find something else for Arnold Allen, and we'll get to that in a second. But below number 9 of Calvin Katar, Shane Burgos lies. And I think Shane Burgos is the dark horse of the division. I made a video not too long ago saying every dark horse of every division in the UFC, and I picked Shane Burgos as one of them in the featherweight division. I think he's an absolute savage, and I think his next fight should be Ryan Hall. I don't want to see Ryan Hall versus Ricardo Lamas. I'm sick of seeing it. Shane Burgos and Ryan Hall were supposed to fight at UFC Columbus. Hall turned it down because he didn't want to fight in Columbus. He did not turn down Shane Burgos as an opponent. I've said this before on my channel. I said Hall turned him down. It makes it sound like Hall's scared of Burgos, but that's not really the case. Hall turned it down at Columbus, but he still wanted to fight Shane Burgos. Let's figure something out. I don't know what Ryan Hall has against Columbus, Ohio. I have no idea, but if he doesn't want to fight there, let's figure out somewhere else. There's a million other places in the world these two can fight. Shane Burgos versus Ryan Hall, two of the most devastating guys on the come up in the featherweight division. Let's start making these under number 10 ranked featherweights square off against each other, and the best half will sink. The best half will swim, and the worst half of them will sink. I want a vetting process of everyone underneath the top 10, all of these up-and-coming contenders in the featherweight division. We need to half their numbers and realise who's really about their fucking business. And Shane Burgos versus Ryan Hall is going to be the start of that for me. Moving on, Arnold Allen is the next ranked guy because Jose Aldo's at number 11 and he's no longer in the division, so I don't know why he's number 11, but either way, Arnold Allen should take on Hakeem Dawodu. Hear me out, guys. Do you know why? Because they can make an event in Canada, and they're going to do an event in Canada, hopefully at UFC Saskatoon, with Curtis Blades versus Alexander Volkov. We'll see how soon this whole pandemic clears up. I want to see Arnold Allen versus Hakeem Dawodu. Hakeem Dawodu, Canadian native. I'm going to give you another knockout. He's very Canadian, and I did not expect that voice to come out of him when I first heard him speak. However, I want to put him against another guy who trains in Canada. I think it makes sense. Arnold Allen's always had trouble capturing the English fan base because he doesn't live in England anymore. He doesn't train in England. So he's kind of not seen as the hometown guy. He's fought a lot of times on these UFC London cards, and the crowd just doesn't seem to get behind him, even when he gets a spectacular finish, because they know he trains in Canada and he lives in Canada when he's fighting. And they don't really like that. So I feel like what's next is for Arnold Allen, try and capture the Canadian market. That would make some sense. He trains there. He lives there. He's at TriStar, which is the same gym as GSP. So the Canadian fans will make some sort of comparison there. Like, oh my God, this guy's training where GSP trained. He's our next big thing. And then you've got Hakeem Dawodu, another Canadian. Let's have these two square off in Canada. Arnold Allen, Hakeem Dawodu. Whoever wins brings the Canadian fan base with them. And whoever loses goes to the back of the line. Arnold Allen versus Hakeem Dawodu makes a lot of sense to me. Moving on. Two of the most equally matched guys, I believe, in this entire division. Sadiq Yusuff versus Dan Ige. They are the same... Well, they're not the same guy whatsoever. Dan Ige is a little bit more volume-based. Sadiq Yusuff likes to pick his shots and throw a lot more power-orientated things. But I think between them, I mean, listen... Masad Bektik and Andre Fili are pretty even Stevens in as much as respect. I think Masad Bektik is a little bit more respected in the featherweight division than Andre Fili, but Masad was coming off a loss. Andre Fili was coming off some wins. So they were kind of in a similar situation in the featherweight division. Dan Ige and Sadiq Yusuff both beat those guys by split decision. There is not a more even matchup to make. I want to see which one of them can make the adjustments necessary, because when you have these two guys that are so evenly matched, it's going to come down to fight IQ. It's going to come down to brains. It's going to come down to who has the better training partners and training camp and who can formulate a better game plan. I want to see Sadiq Yusuff versus Dan Ige, and I want to see it right now. Maybe not right now, but when this whole quarantine is over, I want to see Sadiq Yusuff versus Dan Ige. Those two have to square off, but there are still more contenders to break down outside the rankings. Kron Gracie versus Ricardo Lamas. Two guys very relevant, both coming off losses. Ricardo Lamas versus Ryan Hall. Ryan Hall's on a win streak. Why would he fight Ricardo Lamas, who's coming off a broken jaw loss? That makes no sense in the world. I don't understand why they booked that fight, which is why I want to see Ryan Hall, Shane Burgos. Two guys coming off win streaks. Let's do Kron Gracie versus Ricardo Lamas. Let's give Kron Gracie another big name, a veteran name that's a winnable fight for him. A close one. Two guys coming off losses, looking to gather back some steam. Two big names that if they do win, are going to make a big fight against someone else who's coming off a win. That's the one I want to see. Kron Gracie versus Ricardo Lamas. Sign me the fuck up. Or maybe the winner of this one takes on Cub Swanson when his knee heals up. Or maybe you give Cub Swanson to one of these guys, one of these prospect bouts, like an Arnold Allen Hakeem Dawodu winner, like a Sadiq Yusuff Dan Ige winner. Or, and I'll keep saying or, you just do Cub Swanson versus Andre Fili in California because they're both from there, even though one of them's coming off a win in Cub Swanson and one of them's coming off a loss in Andre Fili. That would be a great fight. Cub Swanson, Andre Philly, sign me up. Two Cali boys going at it in California. Makes all the sense in the world to me. If they're going to remake San Diego, let's do it there. Sounds good to me. Moving on. Grant Dawson versus Zubaira Tukhugov. I didn't even want Grant Dawson to fight Zubaira Tukhugov. But I was so wrong by saying Zubaira Tukhugov was a lightweight in my last video. I just wanted to find a way to put his name in this list of fights, just so I can clear up that I'm very well aware that Zubaira Tukhugov is in the featherweight division. I make mistakes. I've been kicked in the head quite a bit. I'm sorry. And by the way, he might as well be a lightweight anyway, because he is a huge man for the division. But so is Grant Dawson. Let's square him up! Two weight bullies. There can only be one bully in this featherweight division. And we'll see who it's going to be. Grant Dawson, Zubaira Tukhugov, both guys, great grappling. Zubaira Tukhugov's obviously going to have the advantage on the feet. I think Grant Dawson would have an advantage in the grappling area. Let's square these two off. I don't think Grant Dawson deserves a jump up the rankings. He missed weight. He fought a guy in Derek Minner who wasn't the best guy in the fucking world. And he made it look a little bit close as well, to be fair, even though he got a finish. Grant Dawson versus Zubaira Tukhugov. Both guys need to win one more convincingly. Both make weight. I'm talking to you, Grant Dawson, here. And let's really then look at pushing you up the division if you can win this next fight. Grant Dawson, Zubaira Tukhugov's next. Moving on. Bryce Mitchell, Thug Nasty, should take on Charles Jourdain on the Canada card. Am I making sense to you guys here? Imagine having that. Bryce Mitchell, Charles Jourdain. Main card of the Canada fight night. Also on the main card, Arnold Allen versus Hakeem Dawodu. It's just good. It's just really good. Bryce Mitchell goes up to Canada, fights Charles Jourdain, a Canadian native. Both slingers. You've got the grappling heavy guy in Bryce Mitchell. Can Charles Jourdain defend the takedowns and the submission attempts? Can Bryce Mitchell adjust on the feet and survive the onslaught from Charles Jourdain, who's an absolute fucking slinger in the featherweight division, absolutely throws bombs constantly. Took on Doohoo Choi, which I believe was on short notice even for himself. Went in there, won, got the job done. I mean, Charles Jourdain, Bryce Mitchell, big hype coming off both of these guys. Let's square them off. And the winner of this one can maybe take on the winner of Arnold Allen, Hakeem Dawodu. Like, let's say Charles Jourdain beats Bryce Mitchell. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I think Arnold Allen and Bryce Mitchell would both win those bouts. Between Arnold Allen, Hakeem Dawodu, and Mitchell versus Jourdain, I would go with Mitchell and Arnold Allen. However, if Jourdain and Dawodu both win in Canada, now you've got some friction. Who's the real Canadian featherweight prospect here? Then you come back to Canada at Christmas and you square off those two guys to the same audience that watched them both fight separately only months before. That's how you build a fucking star, man. Charles Jourdain, Bryce Mitchell is perfect. Sean Woods and Herbert Burns, last fight on the list. These two guys both coming off big wins, both got entertaining styles, both fucking great fighters. Herbert Burns, the brother of Gilbert Burns, coming off a big win over David. Oh, he's so German, I can't remember his fucking name. I don't think his first name's David even. Nate Landwehr. I'm so happy I got that one. Nate Landwehr is what Herbert Burns is coming off a big win over. A KO by knee in the first round. And Nate Landwehr was a guy with a lot of hype coming into the UFC. And now Herbert Burns has completely stolen all of that hype. And also, Herbert Burns' name is going to grow just by Gilbert Burns, because Gilbert Burns just beat Damian Maia in the first round by KO. And that will trickle down to like, oh, he has a brother, Herbert Burns. Let's pay attention to him as well. I'm looking forward to it. Sean Woodson coming off a big win against Kyle Bochniak by decision. Entertaining style there. Did better than Zabit did against Bochniak, maybe. I mean, he controlled the entire fight. There was never a moment in Sean Woodson versus Kyle Bochniak where Bochniak was pouring on the pressure. And Sean Woodson's a great fighter. He handled Bochniak a little better than Zabit, if I'm honest with you. But Sean Woodson versus Herbert Burns, great fight to make. Two guys coming off a big win in their debuts in the UFC. Let's see who's going to stick around, and let's see who's going to be cannon fodder for the next prospect coming up. Yeah, that's all my fights. Jesus, these videos go by quick. 19 minutes of constant rambling. I'm going to run out of words when I'm older, I swear to God, Jesus Christ. Anyway, those are the fights I want to see. I hope you guys agree with them. Zubaira Tukhugov is a featherweight, not a lightweight. I'm very aware. I believe I meant another Dagestani or a Chechnyan. Oh, I'm messing up so much. He's Chechnyan, not Dagestani. I'm sorry. There's just so many of them. And they all look exactly the same. I'm sorry to say that. But they do, and it's very difficult to remember each one of their names because they all end in ov or ski. Or of ski. It's of ski or of ski at the end of every single one of their names, and it really does confuse me. Or it's Ev. Ev of ski or of ski, Ev ski, any of them fucking... I don't understand. They just need to be a little bit more creative with their names because they're confusing me. But see you later. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. Click that button there. I'll see you later. Goodbye. Yeah.